Hi, this is the BMVC presentation for our paper, Why do Self-Supervised Models Transfer? On the Impact of Invariance on Downstream Tasks. This work was done by Henry Gauck, Tim Hospitalis, and myself, Linus Eriksson. The recent boom of self-supervised pre-training has benefited many tasks across computer vision. A new transfer learning paradigm has emerged, whereby a large self-supervised pre-trained model is taken as a starting point and then fine-tuned on downstream task data. It is also common to use the same model weights as initialization for a variety of downstream tasks. This relies on the ability of these models to transfer widely to diverse tasks, and while the transferability of these models have been shown to be impressive, we have strong reason to believe that different computer vision tasks require totally different properties of pre-trained features. For example, a classification task may benefit from spatial invariance, while a pose estimator needs to retain that spatial information to make accurate predictions. While self-supervised algorithms tend to differ in their choice of pretext task and architectural components, most state-of-the-art approaches rely on losses that induce invariance to a set of augmentations. Furthermore, there seems to be a rough agreement on the optimal data augmentation policy to use during pre-training. For example, most methods use a combination of random crops, horizontal flips, and color distortions. This chosen set of augmentations is likely the result of optimizing the common downstream benchmark of ImageNet classification. We hypothesize that this default augmentation policy leads to features that are optimized for similar tasks to ImageNet, like classification, but are suboptimal for many others, like pose estimation. In this work, we aim to quantify the effects of data augmentation and measure learned invariances in pre-trained features. We also measure the effect of these learned invariances on downstream task performances on a diverse set of tasks covering classification and regression. We ask the following questions. Do learned invariances to synthetic transformations translate to real-world transformations? Is there a trade-off between learning different types of invariances? Do different downstream tasks of interest benefit from different invariances? And is there a simple way to achieve high performance across all tasks? We take inspiration from the visual cortex of the mammalian brain. There are two functional pathways that process visual input, the dorsal stream that deals with spatial and motion information, and the ventral stream that deals with object recognition and appearance. Both these pathways are necessary for high-level cognition. In this work, we use this distinction between spatial and appearance information to study self-supervised learners. In particular, starting from the augmentation policy from MoCo version 2 and many others, we split the set of data augmentations into two groups, the spatial group and the appearance group. Using MoCo version 2 as a baseline state-of-the-art self-supervised algorithm, we train one model for each group of augmentations, default, spatial, and appearance. Apart from the augmentation policy used, all training details are identical. Since the MoCo algorithm works by encouraging invariance to the augmentations used, we now expect the spatial model to exhibit invariance to the spatial transforms used. The architecture for all models is ResNet 50. As baselines, we also compare a model with random weights and one pre-trained by supervised learning on ImageNet. In order to measure the invariance of a self-supervised learner, we develop two metrics. The first one is based on the feature distance between an unaugmented sample and its augmented counterparts. Given a model f and a transformation t, for example rotation, we compute the Euclidean distance between the features of the original image and each of its rotations. The full metric is averaged over all augmentation parameters and all images in the dataset. We similarly define a cosine similarity-based metric. Instead of distance, this measures the angle between feature vectors of the original and augmented images. When comparing the invariances of different models, we may encounter two problems. Let's imagine two models with identical feature spaces, apart from that A is offset from the origin and B is more spread out. When computing the cosine similarity metric of A, it will always be smaller than B, even though the feature spaces contain the same information. Likewise, the distance-based metric of A will always be smaller as the feature space is more compact. To account for this, we normalize each model's feature space by its mean vector and covariance matrix before computing our metrics. This gives us the Mahalanobis distance and a Mahalanobis version of the cosine similarity. Now we move on to the results. This plot shows the invariance to synthetic transforms as measured by our cosine similarity metric. A synthetic transform is one that is implemented in code and can be applied on the raw image. For spatial transformations like flips and rotation, the spatial model is the most invariant due to its use of such augmentations during pre-training. Likewise, the appearance model has the strongest invariance to transformations in color and texture, except for the invert transform. The default model tends to fall in between these two specialized models, suggesting strong invariance to any one transformation is traded off for a reasonable variance across the board. The random model tends to have the highest variance. Furthermore, we find that augmentations do tend to increase invariance to other transforms in the corresponding appearance spatial family, rather than only the specific subset used for training. As an example, we don't train with rotation augmentations, but the spatial model is still highly invariant to them. Next, we look at real-world transforms. These are transforms that are applied in the real world by, for example, moving the camera around a 3D scene or changing the lighting conditions. Across various datasets, we can measure different transforms that correspond closely with our synthetic ones. From the results, we can see that our models have learned strong real-world invariances in many cases. For example, the spatial model has maximum similarity for all the spatial-like transformations in green. The appearance model has maximum similarity for all the appearance-like transformations in orange. We can think of the synthetic transforms as being proxies for the real-world transforms that we actually care about. In this plot, we can see there are strong correlations between synthetic and real-world invariances, meaning that the proxy is often a good one. The anomaly is illumination, which is more correlated with spatial-type transforms than appearance ones, like brightness. This is surprising, but can be somewhat explained by the very low lighting conditions in that dataset. So to summarize, do learned invariances to synthetic transformations translate to invariance to real-world ones? Mostly yes. For example, spatial-style augmentations lead to increased invariance to transforms such as viewpoint, while appearance-style augmentations lead to increased invariance to transforms such as lighting color, exposure, and blur. And second, is there a trade-off between learning different types of invariances? Yes, for both synthetic and real-world transforms, promoting appearance-style invariances decreases spatial-style ones, and vice versa. We have now seen that the default model learns moderate invariances across the board, and that we can learn strong invariances by specializing augmentation. We will next look at how these models perform on downstream prediction tasks, but we first introduce a set of fused models that we will also evaluate. We can, for example, fuse our two specialized spatial and appearance models by concatenating their features. This may result in both types of information being retained, and therefore result in good performance across the board. We also consider a three-way fusion of the default, spatial, and appearance models. Our suite of downstream tasks include classification on CIFAR10, Caltech 101, and flowers, along with facial landmark regression on 300W, Celeb A, and pose estimation on lead sports pose. On the first three, we report accuracy, and on the last three, R-squared. Let's first focus on our non-fused models. It is clear that the supervised, and to a lesser extent the spatial model, are optimized for classification and perform poorly on regression. The opposite is true for our appearance model. The default model in blue is also well optimized for classification, but underperforms on some regression tasks. Now, we consider our fused models and their corresponding baselines. Both fusion models perform well across the board. While the default baselines are unsurprisingly best on classification, our three-way fusion in black is drastically better on 300W and is the most consistent performer across the board. To answer our earlier questions, do different downstream tasks of interest benefit from different invariances? Yes. Across a suite of downstream tasks, we see that recognition-style tasks prefer a representation trained on default or spatial-style augmentations, while pose-related tasks benefit from appearance-style augmentations. In particular, default augmentations underperform in pose-related tasks. Given that different tasks prefer polar opposite augmentations, is there a simple way to achieve high performance across the board? Yes. Simple fusion of multiple representations tuned for different invariances leads to consistent, strong performance across all tasks considered. To conclude our work, we have looked at how augmentations affect invariances and downstream performance of self-supervised learners, and found contrastive methods largely learn invariances to the augmentations used and related transforms. However, specializing to particular spatial or appearance augmentations leads to greater invariances. The learned invariances to synthetic transforms do provide some degree of invariance to corresponding real-world transforms. Real-world downstream tasks prefer different invariances, and specialized features can sometimes outperform default augmentation for spatially sensitive tasks. Fused features provide consistently high performance. This outperforms the default model on post-related tasks, suggesting that it was overtuned for recognition. Our feature ensemble strategy is promising for providing high-performance, general-purpose, real-world features. Thank you for listening, and please find our paper and code through these links.